The only royal who steadfastly refused to stay down was Sarah Ferguson. She consistently battled her way back into the spotlight despite the betrayal, the multimillion-dollar ruin, or the public humiliation. But all of a sudden, she has disappeared and the flashbulbs are utterly cold. Behind the royal walls, rumors are circulating about a final, silent, terrible move that altered everything. However, no one is aware of how calculated the truth is. The last piece of this puzzle reveals a truth she never wanted the public to know, so stay tuned until the very end. If Sarah Ferguson had been under even a small amount of pressure, most people would have crumbled. You must acknowledge that she did not simply survive the ruthless environment of the monarchy in order to comprehend why she abruptly disappeared. The rules of survival were essentially rewritten by her. The public was in complete disbelief for years as she transformed terrible setbacks into enormous financial successes. It all began when she had a setback in the early 1990s that ought to have ended her public career. Unsettling images surfaced and made headlines throughout the world, exposing the Duchess in a highly compromising vacation scandal while she was still legally married. The populace was disgusted, the palace was incensed, and she was immediately banished into the bitter cold. However, rather than withdrawing in embarrassment, she took an unexpected action. She traveled across the Atlantic, landed prestigious television contracts, and transformed herself into a business titan. She allegedly offered access to her ex-husband for a sizable underhanded charge, according to an undercover sting operation, just when the world believed her reputation had stabilized. The horrific video seemed to solidify her social demise. However, sources indicate that she turned to charitable work, children's books, and high-profile television appearances to gradually restore her public image at that same moment of total despair. According to insiders, her capacity to use public sympathy as a weapon turned into her ultimate superpower, leading to a highly personal health struggle in which everyone was rooting for her to recover. Every obstacle she encountered merely paved the way for an incredible recovery. However, the routine that sustained her for 30 years has abruptly and violently stopped. This time, the shadow hanging over her threatens more than just her reputation, so the usual playbook is no longer effective. It could reveal a truth that she can no longer avoid. Sarah Ferguson wanted more than only to get away from the darkness of her past. She deliberately intended to subjugate them. According to sources, she was discreetly getting ready for what was supposed to be the most significant public relations change of her life in recent months. This was more than a straightforward strategy to make a comeback to television or publish another conventional book. Sources claim that she was setting the stage for a huge, multi-million-dollar worldwide brand relaunch with the goal of solidifying her position as a powerful individual who is completely independent of the monarchy. The plan initially appeared to be perfectly designed to capitalize on a surge of resurgent public interest. According to rumors, she was actively seeking high-level counsel in order to put together a top-tier team that could land big production contracts and worldwide media collaborations. According to insiders, her ultimate objective was a victorious comeback to the spotlight, using her renowned fortitude to present herself as an inspiring survivor. The scene was set, and there was a brief period of intense expectation for her next action. However, the entire foundation started to fall apart in a way that nobody could have imagined, just as the first components of her ambitious plan were being implemented. Public documents abruptly showed the calm, methodical closure of various companies associated with her name, including several of her main economic endeavors, rather than a successful relaunch. Even more tragically, her well-known personal charity was compelled to shut down for the foreseeable future. Not only did the momentum slow down, but it completely reversed. The world was left wondering what could possibly have the ability to undermine such a well-thought-out comeback strategy when her meticulously crafted route back to the top struck an invisible roadblock. Sarah Ferguson was totally taken aback by the permanent alteration in the public survival standards. In the past, practically any scandal could be forgotten by the public with a well-timed historical romance novel or a savvy television appearance with Oprah Winfrey. However, the public's patience has entirely run out, and the current media environment is no longer tolerant. She is battling more than one negative headline this time. She is opposing a significant change in the global perspective on accountability. A sinister, well-known connotation that just won't go away is the ultimate anchor pulling her down. Unsealed documents from the latest court admissions have brought awkward former relationships back into the public eye. The public was shocked to learn that, despite his original conviction, Ferguson had apparently written to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, referring to him as a brother and a top friend in leaked emails. Even worse, she had to admit in public that his money had been used to pay off a £15,000 obligation of hers. However, the public isn't the only source of pressure. From the very top of the British monarchy, it is growing. According to insiders, King Charles III is taking a far more stringent and efficient approach, and liabilities are completely eliminated. A disastrous domino effect has started as a result of these growing ties. She was promptly cut off from 7 important charities, including the well-known Teenage Cancer Trust, and her patronage was terminated. An upcoming book agreement was fully terminated, and thousands of printed copies were pulped before they could be put on shelves, forcing her personal charity, Sarah's Trust, to completely close. However, neither a contract loss nor a news disclosure dealt the biggest impact. It revolves around a very particular status symbol that, after defining her entire identity for 30 years, has now been irrevocably taken away. The Duchess of York title served as Sarah Ferguson's greatest asset and shield for almost 40 years. International book agreements, lucrative television engagements, and access to the world's most exclusive circles were all made possible by this golden key. However, when King Charles III formally revoked Prince Andrew of his royal titles, Ferguson immediately lost her position as the Duchess of York, thereby pulling the rug out from under her entire identity. It was evident that she was no longer a protected insider, which was a devastating blow. Since she was no longer royal without her title, losing it was a complete disaster for her international brand. She was just a famous person with a very tainted past. When the city of York unanimously decided to revoke her honorary freedom of the city, a distinction she had maintained since her 1986 marriage, the pressure only grew. To exacerbate the situation, King Charles proceeded with a hotly debated eviction notice, requiring her and Andrew to leave the enormous 30-room royal lodge at Windsor, where they had lived for almost 20 years. Her stay in the ancient mansion had officially ended when removal trucks were seen at the property. The public's perception of her is drastically altered by this twin blow. She is no longer viewed as the tenacious royal underdog overcoming adversity. Rather, the story now centers on a former insider who is frantically trying to cling to what remains of a life that has vanished. She reportedly moved out to live apart from Andrew for the first time in years, suggesting that she has been left utterly on the brink. The safety net that protected her at each and every previous catastrophe has been totally removed. And as the walls keep closing in, she is starting to come to a very disturbing realization about what her destiny really entails. The magnificent pattern of Sarah Ferguson's life has finally come to an end. She has proven to be a relatable fighter by utilizing the chaos to her advantage in every past crisis, from her financial failures to public betrayals. However, the magic has entirely disappeared this time. According to insiders, she has no leverage left after losing her titles, being kicked out the royal lodge, and having her business endeavors fail. She is stuck in a world that no longer requires her story because the public has just gone on. However, those who know her well suggest that she might not want to quietly disappear. According to rumors, she is currently faced with a difficult decision that will permanently change the royal scene. According to sources, she is contemplating a very contentious course of action, possibly working on an explosive literary project. A candid biography might be her last chance to safeguard her future, as her financial resources are severely depleted and her connections to the monarchy have been broken. It would be a risky move that would test her survival instincts against the palace's ultimate wrath. However, the real cost of her decisions is finally becoming apparent as the pressure hits an all-time high. One thing is certain, regardless of whether she decides to speak up or accept her banishment. The final chapter of her incredible adventure is going to be written, and the era of the ultimate royal survivor has come to a close. Sarah Ferguson made a name for herself by persevering through what ought to have been unthinkable. She survived multi-million-dollar debts, constant media criticism, heartbreaking public scandals, and intense personal grief for almost 40 years. She was the only person who could always look at complete devastation, smile, and find a way to regain the public's favor. However, every incredible survival tale finally encounters its ultimate, unsurmountable challenge. The traditional playbook has failed her miserably this time. She was stripped of her illustrious title as Duchess of York, banished from her 30-room stronghold at Royal Lodge, and irrevocably tarnished by the startling revelations of her covert jail visits to Jeffrey Epstein. Every safety net has been severed. The question now is whether Sarah Ferguson still has a place in a world that has formally opted to move on, rather than if she can pull off another spectacular return. Her time as the supreme royal survivor has finally come to an end, leaving a warning about the true cost of royal survival.